A single tree, a remote clearing between two heavily armed armies, a pair of saws, and within seconds, an international crisis that pushed superpowers to the brink of war. August 1976, deep inside the Korean Demilitarized Zone, an operation unfolds whose stakes seem almost absurd. It is known as Operation Paul Bunyan, a show of force to fell one tree. But beneath that simplicity lies a web of deterrence, brinkmanship, and unresolved Cold War tensions. How did a routine maintenance task escalate into one of the most dangerous confrontations of the era? In 1953, the Korean War ended not with a peace treaty, but with an armistice. The peninsula remained divided, suspended in a fragile and unresolved ceasefire. Along the 160-mile military demarcation line and the 2.5-mile buffer zone known as the DMZ, both sides built fortifications, observation posts, and rigid patrol routines. Though open war had ended, tension never truly disappeared. Throughout the 1960s and early 1970s, North Korea regularly tested the limits of restraint, harassing patrols, firing across the border, and staging infiltration attempts. The United States, alongside South Korea, maintained a constant military presence as deterrence. One location was especially volatile, the Joint Security Area, or JSA, at Panmunjom. Here, North Korean and UN command forces stood face to face, sometimes only meters apart. In this environment, visibility mattered. Every movement was watched. Every gesture could be interpreted as provocation. By 1976, a mature poplar tree stood inside the JSA between Checkpoint 3 and Observation Post 5. In winter, when the tree was bare, lines of sight were clear, but in summer, its dense foliage blocked direct observation between posts. What seemed like a mundane landscaping issue became a recurring source of friction. US and South Korean forces repeatedly requested permission to trim or remove the tree. Sometimes trimming was allowed, permanent removal was not. Each request turned into a symbolic standoff, an argument over authority, control, and presence inside the JSA. The broader context mattered. 1976 was a U.S. election year. The Ford administration faced pressure to appear firm on communism while avoiding another war in Asia. Policymakers in Washington and Seoul understood how easily miscalculation in the DMZ could escalate, especially given the shadow of China, the Soviet Union, and nuclear weapons. The tree itself was insignificant. What it represented was not. On August 18, 1976, a UN command work party entered the JSA to trim the tree. The group included U.S. Army engineers, Korean Service Corps personnel, and lightly armed security escorts. The American contingent was led by Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett. For about 15 minutes, the work proceeded uneventfully. Then, Senior Lieutenant Pak Chol, a North Korean officer, arrived with roughly 15 soldiers. Pak ordered the work to stop. After a brief pause, Boniface instructed the team to continue, citing valid authorization under UN rules. Pak issued further warnings. The Americans pressed on. Moments later, the situation exploded. Pak ordered his soldiers to attack. Armed with axes, clubs, and crowbars, they charged the work party. Boniface was struck and beaten to death. Barrett attempted to flee but was repeatedly hit and later died from his wounds. The entire assault lasted less than 30 seconds. Several others were injured. A routine maintenance mission had turned into a deadly act of violence. North Korea claimed the UN forces had provoked the incident. UN and US accounts emphasized that no shots were fired and that their men were largely unarmed. Within hours, emergency meetings were underway in Washington, Seoul, and UN Command headquarters. The killings were seen as a direct challenge to authority and deterrence. The question was immediate and dangerous. How do you respond without starting a war? Too little and deterrence collapses. Too much and escalation becomes uncontrollable. The answer became Operation Paul Bunyan. UN Command, led by General Richard Stilwell, devised a plan that was fast, overwhelming, and symbolic. The goal was simple: return to the same spot and remove the tree completely under a show of force so large it could not be ignored. Surprise, speed, and controlled withdrawal were essential. Privately, Washington authorized retaliation against North Korean positions if fire was opened. U.S. forces in Korea were raised to DEFCON 3, the highest alert level since the armistice. Ground troops, armored vehicles, artillery, helicopters, fighter aircraft, B-52 bombers, and a U.S. carrier group were placed on standby. Yet publicly, the mission would be framed as routine maintenance, not retaliation. At 0700 on August 23, exactly 3 days after the killings, Task Force Vieira entered the JSA without warning. 2 8-man engineer teams, armed with chainsaws, were escorted by security platoons carrying pistols and axe handles, not rifles, to signal restraint. Infantry units secured access points. The bridge of no return was rigged with explosives. Helicopters hovered overhead. North Korean guards watched closely. Their machine guns were visible. They did not intervene. The engineers worked quickly, cutting the tree from atop their vehicles. After 42 minutes, the tree fell. The force withdrew in disciplined order. War had narrowly been avoided. Later that day, Kim Il-sung issued a message expressing regret over the incident. Tensions slowly eased. In 1987, the tree stump was removed and replaced with a memorial plaque honoring Boniface and Barrett. To this day, analysts debate the meaning of Operation Paul Bunyan. Some argue it restored deterrence through overwhelming resolve. Others believe North Korea simply chose not to escalate at that moment. Skeptics suggest de-escalation would occur regardless. What remains undeniable is the power of symbolism and narrative. A tree became a test of authority. A chainsaw became a strategic signal. In today's 24/7 media environment, such secrecy would be nearly impossible. Leaks, misinterpretation, or viral misinformation could escalate a crisis far faster than in 1976. Operation Paul Bunyan remains one of the strangest episodes of Cold War brinkmanship. A mission to cut down a tree became a test of deterrence, restraint, and control at the edge of war. It demonstrated how, in high-stakes environments, symbolism can carry as much weight as firepower, and how even the smallest actions can bring the world frighteningly close to catastrophe.